What do you want to learn about?
If I want to know if you don't, you're not introducing any types of organic fertilizers into the soil. How do you keep your soil prepared? If it's like brand new,
Yeah.
of course.
Okay. Yeah. So, the question is how. He heard me speak earlier, and I suggested that a farm should be relatively. Look at pictures of my farm. The farm should be relatively independent in its fertilizers needs and its needs for feed. And so the question is then how do you get new ground fertile if you don't bring stuff to put it on? And the answer is you grow it right there on the spot. And so the interaction of the warmth of the sun and the atmosphere, along with the moisture in the soil, the interaction of this inevitably creates plant growth, no matter if there's fertility or not. If there's fertility, there will be better plant growth. But generally speaking, there's a process of amelioration going on. Nature makes things get better. And this is something that we tend to forget in all of our intellectual understanding. But when we just go hang out outside, we know that. You feel better. Things get better out there. The soil gets better every year, as long as we don't mess up. So what we do is we grow crops that can make the soil more fertile. And we can gently till it so that those crops do better, consequently making the soil better. We can alternate the crops that we grow. Maybe we grow a shallow root crop and then a deep root crop. Or we might grow a legume and then grow a grain. Alternate. We can grow crops together at the same time. And all these things are ways of making the ground better. And when we look at nature, we realize that there's something that she does that really makes the ground better, and that is nature is a composter. And so we can learn from watching how she makes soils better, and we can do that on a more quicker scale. And this is by getting manures, mixing with leaves and hay and soil, and making compost. And what we get out of that is more than just the fertility in terms of NPK or micronutrients. It's also the ability of the soil to bounce back and to interact with human thought in such a way that we can become conscious participants. Yeah, so I'm just going to answer questions.
Okay, so with the preparations, what's the purpose of putting herbs and animal parts in there?
Okay, so this is a question about the biodynamic practice of putting herbs in an animal organ and burying it. And that's what all these things are right here. And so, in response to what was happening with the synthesis of nitrogen and the use of artificial fertilizers, Rudolf Steiner gave 8 lectures. Rudolf Steiner was insightful philosopher, scientist at the turn of the century, and he saw that these chemicals were only fertilizing the watery element. They were water-soluble fertilizers and weren't really fertilizing the earth. And so the crops that were grown then had bulk and size, but they were lacking nutrition and flavor. And he offered a remedy. He said, chemical, and use compost. And make sure that all your farms have animals on them, and that they use these old farming practices. And so I've studied a lot of old farming practices, and I find them in textbooks. And I am going to answer your question. This is a preliminary answer. So this is a textbook, elementary agriculture for southern schools, productive farming. This textbook was written 100 years ago, and it starts off, the first thing that we do is we put a seed in a glass jar, and we cover it with some paper, and then we look at the roots. This is the first thing we do. The second thing we do is we cover it with a glass jar, and we learn about transpiration. Next thing we do is we go to an aquarium, we see the transpiration, then we stick the egg on the bottle of water with the tube and watch the osmosis. Do you remember doing this in school? Back when I was a kid, we did these things. These are things that were done in schools. You all may be too young for this. You might remember this. Osmosis, where they take the egg and you learn about the membrane, how water can pass through a membrane. Yeah, fascinating stuff. Then we take apart a strawberry flower and learn about the male and female parts, and the student is able to learn, to tell if a flower is going to be self-fruitful or if it's going to be pollinated from outside. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2, we look at seeds. We want to see if the seed is viable or not. How do you tell the quality of the seed? You look at it with a magnifying glass. These books teach observation. They teach deductive reasoning, and they teach a reliance on using your own senses. We sprout seeds. We go learn about all the different weeds. These are all the kids have to learn 20 different weeds. And by the 3rd chapter, we're already grafting fruit trees, plant propagation, 7th grade textbooks. All students knew this stuff. My dad said he learned all this stuff when he was in school. Yeah. So these are 7th grade textbooks on farming. And this is what Steiner said in his lectures. He said, I'm going to give you some practices that will improve your manures, improve your farms, but you have to continue using the good farming practices and go on manuring as before. So before I get into the things that I do to enhance our farming practices, I have to explain to you that we need to remineralize these soils. The hard metal, the metallic ions, the calcium, potassium, magnesium, and then there's phosphorus and sulfur. We're responsible for those. Humans are responsible for those. We have to make sure that those are on the soil, they're ground up rocks, they're put on there. Because, and this is something that a lot of folks don't understand, we didn't get those last glaciers. We're in the southeast. We don't live in Wisconsin or Illinois, where I grew up, where they had a glacier 15,000 years ago, and the soil is blacker than my compost pile. Our soils are lacking minerals. We need to put lime. You have to put lime on soils around here, is that right? You all found this? Yeah, so we have to make sure those things are on there. The way we do this is we use ground up rocks, limestone, or ground up granite, or ground up rock phosphate. Or we can use wood ashes. We practice slash and burn agriculture. We burn wood in the fireplace and put that on, sprinkle the ash in the field. Anytime that we can have a burn pile and take the ashes and sprinkle it out, those minerals then become available for the plants. Yeah. So we have to mineralize. Second thing, we have to till properly. And the art of plowing is lost. And this is another thing that, I don't know what to tell you. I grew up on a farm and we learned how to do this, but a lot of kids don't know how to plow, how to hold the plow, how to set the plow so it plows correctly, how deep to go, what to look for, moisture content of the soil. These are things that you can learn, but it's a lot easier to learn if you've been farming all your life. It's hard to explain it. But what I would say is that we want to till gently. We want to plow slowly. If I'm plowing an acre, it may take me half a day to plow 1 acre. I'm creeping through that. I'm turning the sod over as if I'm taking a baby and sleeping, and I'm just moving the baby over. That's how I want to treat my soils, as if they're alive and simple. So then the other thing that we want to do is we need to add biology. And our soils are lacking in biological activity. Organic farming as such means that we want to get our plant growth through organic processes, and this would mean that we have to have the organic matter in our soils up to 3 or 4%, and that we have a lot of dormant microbes. And when I say a lot, I mean not only quantity, but we want a diversification of species. And when I started studying microbiology 20 years ago, there was 25,000 different species of bacteria and like 6,000 different species of fungus. Well, another 10 years I took another course, and there were 50,000 species of bacteria and something like that. And the last I heard it was 125,000 species of bacteria, and I don't know how many species of fungi, 25,000. But anyway, what I'm getting at is they don't know how many there are. There are a lot of different kinds of microbes. And when a plant grows, a plant puts a shoot down into the soil, and a cotyledon comes up. And then, when the cotyledon opens up, and the first true leaf comes up, the root underneath puts out lateral, and that's when plant growth starts. Before that, you're just using the energy that's been stored in the seed. Once your laterals come out, the plant then becomes the part of the earth that's receptive. And at that point on, there is no hard and fast line between where the root ends and where the soil begins. There's a connection there. And the connection is through fungal hyphae. The roots of underground mold and funguses and that kind of thing. A lot of these don't actually sprout up mushrooms, they just spend their life underground. And there's a lot of different species of these fungal and bacteria things in the ground. And you can take some soil and send it to a lab, and they can tell you what was growing in that soil. That's how specific these microbes are to the plant species that they're involved with. So when a plant is growing, if it's a bean, that plant grows and it makes a specific root exudate that comes off of those bean roots. This is where I oftentimes scratch my head, my dandruff comes off, and I'm explaining to you, this is how things come off of stuff. I'm not going to do that, so they ask not to do that. But you get the picture. Stuff is falling off of stuff all the time. And microbes eat this stuff, and different kinds of microbes. Probably the microbes that eat my dandruff are the different from the microbes that eat your dandruff. I don't know that. But we all have stuff living on us. Actually, if you took our bodies and took all the DNA from all the stuff in our bodies, you would find that 10% of our bodies is our DNA. 90% of the DNA in our bodies belongs to microbes that have nothing to do with us. I'm not really Jeff. I'm really just a bunch of microbes and 10% of them. At most. Anyway, so you get the idea. These roots are growing in the soil. Stuff is coming off the roots. It's specific starches and carbohydrates and things like that. And there are specific microbes that live on them. So these microbes live on what's fluffing coming off this root. Well, they then can have babies because they're growing. And so they propagate. And the more food they get, the more they propagate. So the better a situation is for them, the more they're going to propagate. So the bean plant is growing, and bean-loving microbes are there propagating. So, what happens then is that the plant grows better and puts out more root exudates, and then these microbes then say, wow, this is really cool. We can have more babies. And so they have more babies, and they live off these root exudates. Meanwhile, the plant's like, you know, I could grow a little better if I had a little bit of potassium. And so the microbes are like, well, let's see, if the plant grows better, it'll put off more root exudates, and we can have more babies. So then, the plant microbes, the microbes then, they go, we'll figure out how to get you some potassium. So the fungal hyphae then is stretching out through the soil. It's attached to the root on the one end, but it's stretching out into the soil. And that fungal hyphae is connected to other fungal hyphae. And over here, there's, worn over here is a rock of potassium. These are granite over here, I can tell. You can look at this black and white speckles here. Here's a piece of granite. So this fungal hyphae then can grab some of that, and it can get the potassium out of that rock where the plant root can't. And it can funnel that potassium up into the plant. Or it can happen another way. The plant can say, I need some potassium. And the fungal hyphae goes over here, and it gets the potassium from there. And the potassium is working its way here, but then I go through with my cultivators, and I cultivate it, and I rip that fungal hyphae in half. And the potassium over here can't get in there. But then an earthworm comes over and eats the fungal hyphae, and it starts crawling over to the plant. It's going to go poop over by that plant and get that potassium over there. And just as it about gets to the plant, a bird swoops down, and it picks up the worm, and it takes it over here into the forest, and it poops over here. So now my potassium's way over here in the forest. But then a mouse comes by, and it walks through the poop, and it starts marching over this way. But then a snake comes over and grabs the mouse, and grabs the mouse over here, and then a bird comes and gets the snake and takes it over here, and then the bird comes over and poops by the plant, and the potassium gets right to where the plant goes. And that is exactly how it works in nature. Everything is interconnected. And everything is one big party and one big warfare. It's unbelievable. And you can see this when you work with nature and you live with it. Your plants will grow great as long as you don't do anything to screw it up. Just settle back. Don't do anything. Just pour on the organic matter, make good compost, get your minerals right, love your soil, be soft with your tillage, and plants will grow really, really well. Any questions? Yeah.
Well, I'm not familiar with the word you're using, hyphae. Is that the same as mycorrhizas?
Yes.
Is it the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I like hyphae because I grew up with stereo hyphae.
I like that too.
Did you say you buy inputs? Did you say
Pardon?
you buy lime?
Okay, yeah, so the question is, do I buy lime? Yeah, so the things that we do bring in to the farm as far as soil inputs would be rock dust, lime, granite meal, basalt or rock phosphate, green sand, things of that nature.
How often do you apply that stuff?
Oftentimes, just like one thing of rock phosphate put on pretty thickly will last for 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, in wood ashes, these things maybe every other year, lime every other year.
Are you making biodynamic preps on your farm?
Yes.
You make preps to sell?
No, I give them one.
Give them one?
Yeah, you'll all be able to take some home with you.
I was just curious because there's a thing on aquaponics right now. What's your thoughts on like soilless, like growing vegetables?
I don't do that.
I figured that, but do you think it's just like, you know, it's like not as nutritious because it's not grown in soil, or?
I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
I love soil. I can't imagine.
Hydroponics or aquaponics?
Aquaponics.
That might
Not the same thing.
Yeah.
Not the same thing. Hydroponics and aquaponics, not the same thing. That's why I asked which one.
Oh, okay.
aquaponics might be growing fish. Like we have a bass pond.
Actually, they grow them in these tanks and then they run the water into
Yeah, I've
there.
seen those systems.
Okay.
So can you talk to them about some of the preps, like the one that's made from quartz?
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to talk about the biodynamic preparations. I just wanted to kind of go through a little bit about how plants grow and also the need to, that these preparations are not like a cure-all for bad soils. We have to do cover cropping, crop rotations, mineralizing, gentle tillage, making compost, animal rotations, all those things have to be part of the program. But once we have that in, then we sort of can understand that a farmer is basically incarnating material from the spiritual world. And the carrier for spirit is carbon. And so anything that is alive or was alive is carbon-based. And we're basically a carbon-based plant. And so anything that is alive has something else with the carbon, and that is oxygen. So oxygen is the carrier of life. Oxygen will just fritter away from the carbon. It doesn't want to unite with it unless nitrogen is there. Nitrogen is the bridge between the carbon and the oxygen, or from the spirit and life, just as our souls are the bridge between our life and our spirit. So we have soul life, and this is epitomized by nitrogen, which is the bearer of sensation. Nitrogen is 80% of the air. And so when we're quiet, just be quiet for a second, you can feel the nitrogen. And this nitrogen in the air is how we communicate with each other, and how the farmer knows what's going on with the farm. The nitrogen it comes in our, we breathe it in, and it becomes alive in us, and when it comes into the soil, it becomes alive. And it's of the utmost importance to understand how the nitrogen can help us in the soils. We want it in a live form. We want that nitrogen to come from a bacterial formation on a legume plant, or we want it to come from some earth-borne food, or we want it to come from some sort of biological process where it's in an amino acid protein form, N2. This is what plants can use. Plants don't use nitrates in the forms that we put them on when we throw urea and ammonium, or raw manure for that matter, on our land. That nitrate nitrogen has to be converted to an amino acid nitrogen before the plant can use it. The plant sucks it up. It has to take energy from the plant to use it. That energy in a plant is always in the form of sugar. And so the plants grown with nitrate nitrogen don't taste sweet, whereas plants grown with amino acid taste sweeter. And we notice this on our farm. I put compost on, I grow kale. I also have spots where I just sprinkle kale seed out as part of my cover crops. They're mixed in with turnips and buckwheat and clovers and things like that for some kale. Okay, so if you go into our farm and you cut the kale in the rows that are cultivated and stuff, it tastes pretty good because it's mostly amino acid nitrogen. But there is some nitrate there because of the inevitability of there being, too much. Yeah. But if you go out where the kale that I haven't tilled it all, I just throw this kale seed out there and it's having to compete with a whole lot of other plants. That kale is sweeter because all of its nitrogen is coming from the amino acid. Yeah. So we can learn about this if we use our taste buds. So all of us have these amazing scientific instruments available on our face. They're called your nose, your ears, your tongue. These things are great scientific instruments, and we can learn a lot about the world through them. And when kids were younger, when they had to study this kind of stuff, they had more confidence in their own ability to learn. And we can do this. We can learn just through. You all are a lot smarter than you think. I'm telling you. Get up. Put your shoulders up. There you go. Yeah. So we want to get this ball rolling with this nitrogen in the soil. So what we do is we're going to get the nitrogen going. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to talk about everything else besides nitrogen. Because nitrogen lives with four sisters: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. And so just as nitrogen is sort of bridging the life and the spirit together with the carbon and oxygen is hydrogen, which is moving things back out into the spiritual world. And hydrogen is like fire or the sun, the lightest element. And then sulfur is kind of like the grease that keeps this whole thing going. So sulfur and phosphorus are light bearers that sort of keep this thing going. And so these are the elements then that work sort of laterally, but there's two great forces that are working from the outer reaches of the universe and the center of the earth, and these are calcium and silica. And these are what join with the carbon to make structure. Carbon is the form builder, but we have to have the skeleton and the skin and all these things. And it takes the silica and calcium. So, I just happen to have some silica and calcium with me. And you will notice that silica is very hard and sharp and pointy. It's not water soluble. And it is very different than calcium, which sucks at you and pulls from you. Calcium is not found alone in nature. It's always sucking in some hydrogen to make calcium oxide, or some nitrogen to make calcium nitrate, or calcium sulfate, or calcium and anything. It just doesn't want to be alone. It's greedy. Yeah. So calcium works from the inside. It's in our bones, it's in the seeds of the apples, and it works with growth and reproduction. Silica, on the other hand, is on the outside. It's the sensory apparatus. It's on our eyes and our skin and our hair. It's on the skin of the apple. So silica is working from the outside and calcium from the inside. And a lot of these forces in nature have become not working so well because of human activity. So we can sort of prevent these things from working by compacting the soil and putting chemicals on and a little atmospheric nuclear bomb over here and a little bit of petroleum spills over here and all this stuff causes some problems. And so to help work with the calcium, we make a preparation. And it's, we call this horn manure. You can and this is colloidal in nature. And it makes a ball, and you can kind of push on it and it comes back. Pretty cool. And we take a small amount of this, about 1/3 of a cup, and stir it in 3 gallons of water and sprinkle it on an acre of land in an effort to help bring some of these beneficial microbes back in, and it's like a homeopathic dose. And the way we make this is we take a cow horn and we stuff it full of fresh manure in the fall, and we bury it in the ground, and in the spring we dig it up, and for some reason it's changed into this other stuff. Now when I first heard about this, I thought, this is the biggest bunch of bunk I've ever heard. I mean, I was like, you know, my dad gave me this book and we were both like, that's some good ideas in it, but this is just so... Never kids used to do this. You know, that is logo. Yeah. So, the person that was teaching me about this said, you know, you don't have to believe this. This is not a faith-based thing. You don't have to believe it. You can just do this, and it'll work. Okay, so
How do you do that in any volume?
I bury lots of them. I bury a couple hundred of them.
Really?
Yeah. So anyway, so what I did is I did it. You know, we had a nice garden that year, and make a lot of it. Then next March, we noticed that our potatoes were still hard and firm, and were really kept well. And we thought, yeah, we must have done something good last year. What was it? And then we remembered this. And thought, let's try that again. So, yeah, it kind of hooked me. So then I got to thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense, the cow horn would do this. So I took a goat horn, stuffed it with manure. I took a pint jar, stuffed it with manure, and I took my cow horn, stuffed it with manure, and buried them all in the same pit. Pulled them up same time, next May, and the green, the manure was green in the cow horn, the manure was green and fresh in the pint jar, and the cow horn, it somehow turned into this humus product. Don't ask me how. Something about cow horn. Anyway, so we also take these quartz crystals that may be being passed around, that quartz crystal there, and you find those, that's probably a geode from our farm, but we also have crystals like in Arkansas or Brazil, and a lot of people wear these crystals, on them. So I take them and I smash them up and make a powder with them. And then I take this powder and I bury the cow horn, but this time, instead of burying it in the fall and digging it up in the spring, I bury it in the spring and dig it up in the fall. And this one doesn't help my plants to grow and reproduce and stuff. It has something else. It kind of works, instead of with the earth and the water forces to make stuff grow, it works with the light and air and warmth forces to kind of bring down and make things ripe, become more nutritious, form a good skin, keeping qualities, and nutritional qualities, and things like that. So there's poles in this thing. You don't want just growth. What are you going to have? You're going to have fungal problems. Silica is what sort of damages them.
Are these, the inputs of the minerals, are those expensive at all, or hard to obtain?
The quartz crystals?
Yeah.
No.
Quartz crystals are.
No. The quartz is 50% of the Earth's crust. Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, so there's,
You get cow horns, you go to the local slaughterhouse.
yeah, you go to the slaughterhouse to get
It
some.
doesn't matter if it's a grass-fed cow or you just eat.
Well, you have your brothers, but don't do something because it's not the perfect thing. One of my sayings is, if you're a perfectionist, you will not make a gardener. You have got to screw up most of the time to be a good gardener. Just get over it. Screw up and then go on. By the way, all that I'm teaching you is from 40 years of the stupidest, dumbest mistakes you could possibly make. Hey, I have people that know me for a while. Yeah.
How much did you say, what's the mixture when you get this out of the?
A third of a cup to 3 gallons of water. The water should be non-chlorinated. What we're doing is we're propagating these things. So again, go back and do the bacteria propagate in 3 seconds sometimes. In 3 seconds, a bacteria can be a mama. In 6 seconds, it can be a grandma. In 9 seconds, it can be a great-grandma to lots of great-grandchildren. Yeah, so in a real quick time, we can have microbial population explosions in our soil or in the bucket of water that we're stirring the stuff up. So we stir the stuff up, and these things, we're adding air and water, the very things that they need. And it makes a whole bunch of them, but immediately, as soon as you quit stirring it, they start dying. So you take a whisk broom and sprinkle it on the ground, get that into the soils as the evening dew is falling. And so what we're doing is we're homeopathically potentizing cow manure, which is the very best fertilizer. We're putting in the cow horn, which was on the cow, which somehow there's forces in this cow that the cow horn and the manure somehow works together to make this great fertilizer in the cow. We do something utterly unnatural, put the manure in the cow horn, bury it, take it out. It's like homeopathically potentized. It's got lots of enzymes and hormones and all these things that we don't know anything about. And then we start stirring. We stir this up and we get it going, we get a real free vortex, and then we start stirring the other way and we get chaos and bubbles and all this stuff. And it's air and water, and the microbes are like, holy moly, let's have babies! And then lots of babies. And then we sprinkle this onto our land. And the land has had the compost, it's had the cover crops, it's had the minerals, it's been gently tilled. So then these microbes are like, all right, here we are. and they spread out through the land as it works in, yeah. So this is kind of how that's done. Did that explain that?
Did you say with a whisk room?
I do, that's how I do it, yeah.
So, does, when you do it, then you have, it's like, well, how does the calendar come into play? Do you use the calendar
No.
as well? No.
Yeah. So there's something called a biodynamic calendar, and Rudolf Steiner makes it real clear in his lectures that, thank God, the moon doesn't require human intelligence to get full every month. So if you do something at the wrong sign, guess what? The right sign will come around.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about the calendar. It'll drive you bananas, and you won't get stuff done. Now, so I have these agricultural calendars, and I do look at them after I've done my day's work and find out where I fucked up. But generally speaking, I do avoid eclipses. I have had experiences with planting eclipses and it wasn't good. And I like to plant in Scorpio or something. So this year, for example, I waited until July 23rd. Moon was in Scorpio. It was just like the perfect time to plant greens. I had some ground. I fluffed it up real good. Planted it. It rained. Nothing came up. And then I planted 2 weeks later in some other land. It was the wrong sign, and things came up great. There's so many factors. I think I'd gotten the ground so loose and fluffy that there was too much air, and I had to compact the seed. So there's so many other factors involved. So don't get hung up on the calendars. Do these things tomorrow. If you get some of this stuff and take it home with you, just put it out tomorrow. Don't wait until things are right. It's never the right time. You can always find an excuse. We're humans. We're the best rationalizers there are. If you don't want to do something, you will find a reason.
You know, I love cucumbers, and I wanted some so bad this year. Last year, I had great cucumbers. I promise you, I planted them twice, and they never came up. And finally, I got it. I just heard it. It's not gonna happen this year. And I just didn't do it. And
Well, every year is
I
different.
totally understand it, but I just left it alone. I wasn't going to go.
Sometimes if you want something too badly, you don't get it.
I would have to have cucumbers. I would have to buy them. I just gave up. I didn't force it.
So, these are the field sprays. There's the corn silica. We put that one on in the morning, and we put the corn manure on in the evening. And they work with the silica and the calcium sources respectively. Anyway, so then, and basically what I'm doing is I'm going through these chapters of this book. We've just gone through 4 chapters. We've talked about the farm as an organism that has all of its food and feed. You know, we talked about calcium, silica, we talked about some of these elements. And now we've come to these 2. And now we're going to go to the next chapter, which is how to improve the manure. And so what we're going to do is we realize that compost is what we want to build our soil. And so to really make good compost, we're going to make some more homeopathic remedies to help re-enliven some of these microbes and forces that have been lost through the kind of the detrimental effects of our poor farming practices, probably before we even got our farms. Yeah. So one thing we do is and these are things that you can read. But we take the flowers of yarrow and we clip off the little florets, and we find a male deer, a stag, and we get the bladder, and we pour out the urine, and we put in these yarrow flowers, and we sew it up, and then we hang it up in the sun during the summer. We bury it in the earth during the winter, and then we have a humus product, and that's what's in here. This is the yarrow preparation. And this one, then we were talking about amino acids, and the amino acids are like the building blocks of proteins. And so this yarrow helps to build these proteins and helps this amino acid thing. And it does it with the help of sulfur and potassium. So this preparation helps to enliven the potassium fixed microorganisms and the sulfur, which are so important to make the compost then able to make these plants build up their proteins properly. We want to have balance and stuff like this. So that one really helps with that.
You got 5 minutes, Jeff.
Okay. Yeah, so calcium and sulfur are at work in this preparation. This is chamomile flowers that we are putting into the intestines of a cow. We make sausages, and then we bury these, and this preparation helps to enliven the soil. Calcium and sulfur. Yeah. So here we have, we're doing some pretty weird things here. Right? You guys should be appalled. Why do you walk out on me? What are you doing?
Do you have to have fresh stag ladder and fresh,
Okay, good question. They need to be fresh. I think they're better if they're fresh, but you can take a stag ladder and you want to make sure it has the penis on it, that's attached, so that you know that you have a male, because you don't want the female here, so it's got to be the male. And you don't have to have that, you just need to know that was there. So then you can cut it and put a straw in it and blow it up, and it'll get that big, and you can tie it up and just hang it in your living room, it'll dry out, and then you can put your
so you'll be able to reuse it?
Yeah, then you can put
If you don't know that you'll have access to getting another one in your life.
right, yeah. You can only legally harvest your bladder certain times a year. Yeah, so, or you can dry the yarrow flowers and just wait till honey season and do it that way too. But you'll notice that what we're using here is a medicine for kidney infections and bladder infections, yarrow. And we're putting it into a bladder. Chamomile, what does chamomile use medicinally for? Tummy ache. So we're putting it into the intestine. Another preparation we make is made from stinging nettle. This is made from stinging nettle. This one works with iron. And this helps the manure in the soil to become sensitive. And this is, again, what we're talking about with this microbial intelligence. And we want our soils to be so smart and so intelligent that, and all these microbes in there, that when we plant our seed in there and stand back and keep all the other weeds growing, that seed is just like connected to the bottom of the earth, it's connected to the farthest cosmos, and it really wants to grow and be happy. And we can do this when we have the soil intelligence going via the microbial connection that's happening there in nature. Yeah. And everything being connected.
So the stinging metal you don't put in?
We put it into a clay vessel and surround it with peat moss. This one here is made from white oak bark, and this one is a plant that has a lot of calcium. Again, we're trying to enliven this calcium, and so the way we do this one is when we kill a cow, we cut off the head and we scoop out the brains and immediately put in ground up white oak bark into the skull cavity. Again, we have a calcium skull cavity with the potential of ego, but not an ego. Cows don't have ego. And so we put in a high calcium, living calcium from white oak bark, which is really, in a lot of ways, the epitome of a great tree. And we're putting it into this highly evolved domestic animal skull. And we bury this in a muddy spot. And then a year later, we dig it up, and we have this product. And it helps the plants that are grown in soils treated this way to be able to resist disease. Then when we want to work with potassium, but not with sulfur, but with silica, we use dandelion. And dandelion, the little messenger from heaven, with a big taproot and beautiful flowers. First flowering plant on our farm, last flowering plant on our farm, all the time. Dandelions are wonderful, and they, yeah.
Are these ancient formulas or?
We don't know. So Steiner said in his lectures that people in olden times knew how to make them fit to grow plants. They knew certain practices, and then he told us these things, but he didn't say specifically, although we know that he did study with herbalists and that kind of thing. But Ralph Steiner was not a farmer or a gardener. He was an academic, intellectual snob, I'm sure. But he he was pretty loving too. So, we don't really know. So this one here, we're putting the dandelion flowers in the stomach lining of a cow, the mesentery. And again, we're burying it for a year, putting a little bit of that into the compost. And then when we work with phosphorus, we use the flowers of valerian. And you won't even have to open this up to smell it. And it has a beautiful smell. It's fermented valerian juice. And this helps to stimulate phosphorus. And what we're doing is we're trying to get these microorganisms so alive in the soil and get the plants sensitized where they can draw into them whatever they need. And so there's homeopathic doses of all the minerals right in the air, right here. There's gold right here. In this much air, there's homeopathic amounts of all of everything. And plants and humans can get this stuff into our bodies, you know, once we become sensitive and once we just work with nature and not mess up. And, you know, so it all works.
At any given time, how much stuff do you have buried in your yard?
I have, like right now, I have cow horns and we've dug up pretty much everything else. There was some nettle still buried. Yeah, but we bury. And then these things, we can store them for years too, yeah.
Do you reuse animal organs?
Okay, do we reuse animal organs? The cow horns we use 3 or 4 times, but the other organs are gone. Yeah,
So when you dig them up, you.
yeah, when I dig up the bladder or the mesentery is pretty dissolved. And
So it's just like a big. block?
yeah,
Okay.
right.
How do you keep it down from digging out?
We put on screens on top of it and piled with rocks and things like that. Yeah, you have to keep, yeah. So all biodynamic practitioners have, there's an initiation process, and this involves burying a prep, or one of these preparations, and never being able to find it. My farm has some of those. Another one is the time when I was making some of the dandelion preparation, and I made one, put it here, made it here, put it there, made another one, put it there, and the first one was gone, and my dog was over there with it. So, these things happen. Dogs are very interested in biodynamics.
Scientific studies that prove this work.
Yeah, so the scientific studies have proven, yeah, Herbert Kopp has some good books on that, and Heinrich Pfeiffer did a lot of research in Steiner's time. And what they found is that these preparations have lots of enzymes, growth hormones, auxins, but we don't really understand those things very well. An enzyme is necessary for biological processes in the formation of protein, but it's a catalyst. It doesn't get used up. If it's not there, the process can't happen. But if it's there, the process can happen, but it doesn't get used up. So it's a good idea to have lots of enzymes around. This is one of the reasons that we don't want a compost pile to get over 120 degrees, because that would kill the enzymes. We want to have enzymes. You know, we want to have bacteria and fungal stuff all around us all the time. Elaine Ingham was one of my teachers, and one thing her pet peeve is bacterial soap. You know.
Oh my God.
So she said, she goes into, and there's bacterial soap. She comes out and she's like mad. She's like, give me a compost pile so I can wash my hands. And she would rather stick her hand in the compost pile washing than to washing the bacterial soap. Yeah.
So when do you apply these preparations to the land before you plant?
So generally the horn manure is put on in the spring before we plant, and or the fall, and then the horn silica we put on while the plants are growing, and then these other ones are put into the compost pile.
Oh.
Yeah. So these 6 ones I just talked about all go into a compost pile, about a tablespoon for a pile that could be 10 or 15 tons. Yeah. So it's small amounts. We put them in separate places, about this far apart or something.
Sprinkle them?
No, we put them in whole in the spot, and then just let the pile alone. Don't do anything. The best thing a gardener can do is what?
Nothing.
There you go. You got it.
Don't turn it or anything.
No,
just
let it go, and then
For how
at
long?
6 months or so, then I might turn it or move the compost or put it on the land or something like that.
I think you said this earlier, but I missed it. How do you gather manure
Okay, so I have an area big as this room. I put a roll of hay out over here, one out over there, one out over there, one out over there. 40 head of cattle come in there, they eat it, they poop, they pee. Then I put one over there and one over there. And I do this like for 2 or 3 weeks. After that time, there's hay, manure, peat on soil, muddy mess, gross, about that thick.
And that's your compost.
I take a front end loader
Uh-huh.
and I roll this up and pile it up. And I'm very specific on how I want my piles to look. If I make a windrow, but if you're looking down the windrow, it looks like an M.
Wow.
And I have that so that all the water that falls on it stays in it. Water is exceedingly beneficial for manure. We don't want our compost piles to dry out and get that white powdery stuff. That's bad. You have to have moisture and air. So by having this like this, then I have air can get to it in lots of ways. Just as in my fields, I never want my field to be flat. I always cultivate like this with these things that leave ridges, so that the whole thing is like musical notes, or it's like a symphony. It's like there's waves, sound waves, and that way, when the ground is wavy in between your crops instead of flat, there's more soil surface to air interaction. You keep that all fluffed up loose all the time, air can get in. And when air can get into the soil, you bring nitrogen in, it becomes alive. And how does it become alive? It becomes alive because of all these microbes. And they're living in the soil and propagating. And then that nitrogen is the very nitrogen that you want in your food, because that nitrogen is nitrogen that will help the plants become sensitive. Nitrogen is the sensitive. Nitrogen works with our soul life. So when we meditate, we hold in more carbon dioxide and we become more aware of the nitrogen. And so it's the same thing with these plants. When they have this, they become more sensitive. So that the final product, the food for the human being or the animals, then has a higher of awareness or consciousness raising ability. And this is what we want in our food. We want to make sure that our food nourishes the human being as much as possible. And this is what's wrong with agriculture today, is that nitrogen is coming from the synthesis of ammonia, urea, and nitrogen is synthetic.
I know we have more questions.
I'm done. Thank you all so much.
Okay.